My name is Calum Macpherson. I am the Dean of the School of Graduate Studies and Director of Research here at St. George's University. I have been here for the last 27 years, and before that I was in Trinidad at the University of the West Indies. So climate change is undoubtedly the greatest threat to human health. The science is unequivocal. Here in the Caribbean, we have increasing frequencies and intensities of tropical storms and even hurricanes, which obviously have immediate and long-term health impacts. Our dry and rainy seasons, which usually were taught ran from the rainy season from June till December, and the dry season from January to the end of May. That's no longer true. And we have many little dry seasons in the rainy season, and sometimes it rains in the middle of the dry season. And these changes to our climate profoundly affects the impacts on growing agricultural output and growing crops. So we need to find appropriate solutions for that. We have increasing sea level rises, which haven't impacted us yet quite as much as some of the Pacific islands and the lower lying small island developing states in the Indian Ocean, for example. But they are impacting our coastline, they are impacting our mangroves, and they are impacting on the health and well-being of many communities. The intensity of the storms and the runoff from the land into the sea and affecting our coral reefs are also important changes to our climate. We are seeing ever more the Sahara dust coming from across the Atlantic Ocean, from the Sahara Desert, and coating our land and causing a lot of dust in the air, which will undoubtedly affect the rates of asthma and other conditions in the region. The increasing heat waves will affect particularly our vulnerable population in terms of heat stress and even death in the region. So my remit is to talk a little bit about the climate change and the reporting by journalists. There are wonderful things that are being reported, and there are also areas that are not done quite as well. In terms of the overall stories, I think the main message that climate change is unequivocally real is an important component. So to put in a story that this is what the climate change people believe is, in my opinion, no longer relevant. The number of scientists who don't believe climate change is real are a very few minority today. And so that is an area that can be left out of stories. The evidence for climate change is incredibly real. So an example of a good news story would be recently I watched a program which talked about a new development, housing development in Florida in the US, where they'd covered 800 acres with solar panels generating renewable energy for this housing estate. And that was a good news story. But in that story, it also mentioned that the local residents were putting on solar panels on their roofs to supplement the energy and storing the energy in batteries. And it also covered the fact that there was the wetlands had been regenerated. So all great news coverage. Here in the Caribbean, we don't have 800 acres to cover with solar panels, but we might have 800 acres on roofs of buildings that already exist. that could be used for generating that power. And I was left from that good news story on a developer trying to do their best for climate change, wondering whether they'd maximized the areas. So if we have new developments here in the Caribbean, uh, do the builders, the developers, build the houses to cope with climate change? Do they insulate them properly? Do they have the windows so that they reflect the solar heat, so that the air conditioning requirements are less given our heat? Are the buildings built so that the roofs can be positioned to have solar panels on the roof and capture as much energy as we can? Do they collect the water, the rainwater, so that we don't have to use desalination and energy for desalinating water, or to take water from our reservoirs and in small island developing states where we have some of the highest human densities on the planet and where we have water insecurity? Do they add to that, or could they be looking at ways of water conservation? Because after all, if you're building right on the coast and it rains and that water is going into the sea, that water is water that could be used for the plants, for the shrubs, for using to flush toilets, etc. And so are they maximizing the developments? So I congratulate you on taking time to be part of this course, and journalists have such an essential role in providing the background story to every climate change story that there is. I would just like to share that at St. George's University, we have one of the 6 global regional collaborating centers of the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. We have a WHO collaborating center on environmental and occupational health. We have students and undergraduate students and graduate students looking at the impacts of climate change on our natural environment, from turtles to the rainforest, to regeneration, to using their nutmeg trees to prevent the rainfall, the intense rainfall, from flushing soil into the rivers and eventually into the sea. So we have a range of projects, and I would welcome you all to see us as a resource here in Grenada if you are covering a story on climate change. And thanks again, Dr. Drury, for the invitation to contribute to this course.